What would you do if a teenager walked up your driveway, pointed at your motorcycle, and said, "Mom says you're giving me that one"? Imagine paying years of HOA dues just to get told your Harley is a community donation. I mean, what would you even say? It was a warm Saturday. Skies, the color of clean steel. I was on the porch, with coffee that tasted like a decent apology for a long week. The cul-de-sac looked like a brochure trimmed hedges. Flags lifting in the breeze. Sprinklers ticking in rhythm. That calm. That polite, quiet. Felt like a promise. Then a kid I'd never seen before marched onto my driveway like he had an appointment with my property and put his palm right on the tank of my Harley. "I'll take this one," he announced. Not a question. A decision. His voice had that practiced confidence kids get when they've been told grown-ups can't tell them no. I blinked. "You're joking." "Right." He tilted his head toward the street. There stood his mother, Karen, sunglasses, arms crossed, posture like a judge. If confidence had a perfume, she'd sprayed too much. She gave me a tiny wave. The kind people save for parades. They think they're leading. "Mom said you'd give it to me." The kid said. The board agreed. The board, buddy. That's my motorcycle. I set my mug down 'cause my hand had started to shake. Just a little. I've had that bike for over a decade. I rebuilt the car myself. It's not a yard ornament. It's mine. Karen stepped off the curb. Heels tapping, like punctuation. "It's an eyesore and a nuisance," she declared. "This is a family neighborhood. The board discussed it. We think it should go to someone who'd appreciate it. My son turns 17 soon. It's perfect for him." I laughed before I could help it. With respect? Absolutely not. Her smile chilled. "If you won't be neighborly, we'll handle it another way." She turned, crisp as folded paper, and walked off with her son. The moment they disappeared behind their trimmed hedge, the birds went back to singing. But the promise of calm, gone. You know that feeling when a storm is somewhere you can't see, but you can smell it? That. I rolled the Harley under the oak beside the garage. The spot where afternoon shade paints the chrome with leaf-shaped light. I wiped a smudge off the tank. I swear, hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier and told myself it'd blow over. Folks have weird days. Maybe she was just mad about something else. Maybe I misheard. Maybe I wanted to believe that. By late afternoon, the neighborhood was soft with grill smoke and hose water. I pulled the bike out for a short ride, nothing wild. Just a loop. Wind on my jacket. Engine thrum low, like a heartbeat. When I came back and killed the ignition, I heard sirens, not loud at first, but rising. 2 patrol cars slid to a stop at my curb. "Sir," an officer called, stepping out with his notepad. "Please step away from the motorcycle." I froze. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" "Report of stolen property on site," he said. "A minor in the neighborhood states his promised property is being withheld." Promised. That's my bike. I kept my voice steady. Titles inside. Registration too. Been in my name since before we planted that oak. Karen appeared as if the sirens had summoned her. Son at her elbow. She pointed at the Harley like she was identifying a suspect in a lineup. "There it is. He told my son he could have it." Then he reneged. "That's illegal. You can do something about that." "Right." The second officer's expression suggested he'd met a Karen or two. "Sir, can you provide proof of ownership?" "Absolutely. It's inside." "Stay here," he said gently. "Tell us where to look." I told them the file drawer, the folder with a red tab, the plastic sleeve with the title. They were in and out in minutes. The officer returned with the papers, compared the VIN to the frame, then nodded at his partner. "It's his," he said. "Clean title. Long-term ownership." Karen's mouth pinched like she'd bitten a lemon she didn't order. Her son scrunched his face and hissed something about it being so unfair. "Ma'am," the officer said. "Careful. Patient. Disputes over gifts aren't theft if there was no transfer. This is not a criminal matter." Karen tried another angle. He created false expectations for a minor. That's fraud. The officer closed his notepad. He had the soft voice of a dad who'd learned to pick his battles. "No charges today." They left. The cul-de-sac breathed again. Karen didn't. She stared at me like I'd failed a test she wrote. Then she turned and walked back home, each step saying, "This isn't over." It wasn't. 3 mornings later, I found a letter taped to my door, HOA letterhead. Logo crisp. Language colder than a freezer. Notice of violation, community disruption, and failure to comply with neighborhood courtesy standards. I read it twice. Then a third time. It accused me of making false verbal commitments, creating a hostile environment, and refusing a reasonable transfer that the board verbally endorsed. If annoyance had a thermostat, mine shot straight to boiling. But anger's loud and documentation's quiet. And quiet usually wins. I took a breath, set the letter on the table, and started a folder. Title copy, registration copy, photos of the Harley from every angle, a printout screenshot of the doorbell cam showing the kid touching the tank, lips shaped around. "Mom says you'd give it to me." I called Mark, a buddy from the veterans group who works in the state attorney's office. We aren't best friends, but we've stood at attention on the same cracked asphalt. "So that's something." I told him what happened. He didn't laugh. He didn't say, "Ignore it." He said, "Sounds like someone's trying to weaponize process to force a private transfer. Document everything. Bring me what you've got." So I did. I spent 2 evenings turning my kitchen table into a command post. Sticky notes, like flags. Envelopes in neat stacks. I printed an index like a tiny librarian with a grudge. I even added a page of dates in clean columns: first contact, police call, violation letter, next HOA meeting. The following week I walked into the state attorney's office with a fat folder and the polite smile of a man who's trying not to make anyone's day harder. The receptionist took the folder like it might bite and slid it onto a cart. "We'll log this," she said. "You'll get a case number by email." When I stepped back into the sun, I felt 10 pounds lighter. The truth didn't change, but it had a binder now. And binders don't get flustered. The email landed the next day. Case number. Assigned reviewer. A polite line about potential mediation if the other party escalated. I forwarded to myself twice. Because, I have trust issues with inboxes. That evening, I rode slow past the park. Kids on scooters bumped over the seams in the sidewalk. A little dog chased a shadow like it owed him money. And there, beside the tennis court, Karen talked to 2 board members, one with a clipboard, one with the posture of a man who knows meetings too well. They glanced at me. She kept talking. The clipboard nodded. Where anger had been, resolve set in like cured concrete. I was not giving up my bike. I was not playing tug-of-war with a woman who thought rules were a ladder for personal errands. I was going to show up. Speak plain. And let their process meet my receipts. The HOA meeting was on a Thursday in a room that smelled like old carpet and new markers. Folding chairs. Lukewarm water in tiny paper cups. A banner with the subdivision name and a tree that looked nothing like our trees. I arrived early. Sat in the second row. And set my folder on my lap where I could feel its steady weight. Neighbors trickled in with polite nods. Some I knew. Some I didn't. There was a murmur when Karen entered. She wore the kind of smile you put on for winning photos. Her son slouched 2 rows back. Thumbs dancing on an invisible phone game. The board members took their places. Bill, the president. Glasses. Careful voice. Dana, the treasurer. Practical and tired. And a secretary whose name tag announced Tasha. New business. Bill said, after the minutes and the landscaping update. Karen. You asked for time. Karen rose like a curtain. Thank you. I'm here because a neighbor misled my minor son regarding a motorcycle. He promised to donate it. He refused at the last moment, causing distress, police involvement, and disruption to our peaceful community. She turned, palm up toward me, as if introducing a difficult guest on a talk show. He parks it where everyone must look at it. He revs the engine on weekend mornings. It's an eyesore and a nuisance. Dana scribbled. Tasha typed. Bill looked at Karen. Then at me. Mr. Owens. I stood. I never promised anyone my motorcycle. I have owned it for years. I maintain it. I ride responsibly. The police verified my title on site and left. As for disruption, here's the letter I received. And here are photos and the video still of Karen's son touching the bike and saying, Mom says you'd give it to me. I walked the stills to the front, set them beside the microphone, and slid a copy of the police incident card across to Bill. Karen's smile turned brittle. That's out of context. Context is what I brought, I said, keeping my voice low. Also, I filed documentation with the state attorney's office. They assigned a case number. I held up the email printout. Paper doesn't tremble. People do. Tonight. I didn't. Bill adjusted his glasses. We'll need to review these materials. Karen tried again. He's hostile. He intimidated my son. A hand went up in the back. Mrs. Whitaker, who taught second grade so long, she'd turned her patience into a weapon. I've lived across from him for 5 years, she said. He's respectful. That bike's loud. Sure. But only when he leaves on Saturday. And it's not early. This sounds personal. The room hummed. Not loud, but enough. Bill tapped his pen. Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. He looked at Karen. We will not be demanding the transfer of private property. That is not within our purview. We will take under advisement any noise concerns within the rules. Meeting moves on. Karen sank back into her chair. Anger tucked under a blanket of composure. I sat, felt my pulse in my fingers, and exhaled so slow it didn't count as a victory lap. You know when a plane hits a rough patch, and then the cabin smooths out? The smooth didn't last. 2 days later, I received a courtesy notice about signage. Apparently, the tiny flag decal on my garage tool cabinet, visible when the door was open, violated a rule about unapproved displays. The next afternoon, another note arrived about improper visible equipment because a neighbor saw an oil pan during maintenance. Then came a complaint about rear yard weeds, even though my grass looked like a commercial for the color green. Individually, each notice was silly. Together, they were a pattern. I started a second folder labeled petty in black marker, not mature. Maybe but honest. I snapped date-stamped photos of the garage with the door closed. The yard. The clean concrete. I printed the rulebook and highlighted in soft yellow the parts that said absolutely nothing about garage decals or oil pans used for less than a day. I also started walking the neighborhood more. Not in an angry way. In a howdy way. I waved at dog walkers. I held gates for parents with strollers. I made small talk about weather and basal root rot, like I had a degree in it. And folks started telling me things back. About paint colors they were told to repaint after approval. About fines for a trash can glimpsed for 1 minute on a windy afternoon. About a letter that implied a service dog vest was unapproved attire. Different stories. Same shadow. Karen's name was everywhere. Sometimes front and center with a signature. Sometimes, in the background, as a whisper she pushed. She complained. She seed the board, and then reminded them to act. People had put up with it because pushing back seemed exhausting. And because most of us moved here for quiet. Not a fight. Quiet is good. But quiet can also be cover for a bully. One evening, I stood over the Harley with a microfiber cloth, polishing the tank until I could count clouds in it. There was a clip of my father in my head. He taught me to fix things. To keep tools clean even when life was muddy. Start with what you can control, he'd say. Then expand the circle. So I did. I wrote a letter to the board. Polite. Specific. No adjectives I'd regret. I listed dates, notices, and rule references. I requested clarification on the unapproved display issue and asked for the exact rule citation. I copied Mark on the email and used the case number like a fence post to tie the rope to. Facts are fences. They keep the goats where they belong. Dana replied the next morning. Thank you for your thorough documentation. The signage notice was issued in error. The oil pan notice should have been a door knock, not a letter. We are reviewing complaint procedures. She added a line that read like someone trying to keep a ship steady in choppy water. Please direct future concerns to the board inbox rather than individual members. Translation: stop letting Karen be the whole show. A week later. Mediation. Not a courtroom. A low-ceilinged office with soft chairs and a table that had seen too many coffee cups. A staff mediator sat between us. Bill and Dana were there. Karen too. Jaw tense. Son at home, presumably plotting birthday parties that didn't include my Harley. The mediator explained how it would go. We each speak. We look for resolutions within the rules. No yelling. No interruptions. We all nodded like students on the first day. Karen went first. The motorcycle disrupts the aesthetic of the block, she said. It attracts attention. It's loud. He flaunts it. It makes my son feel unsafe. Unsafe, I echoed before I could stop. He walked onto my property and touched it. I took a breath. Sorry. I'll wait my turn. She continued. He also embarrassed me publicly at the meeting. The mediator glanced at the board. We're here to talk about actions, not feelings. Though we acknowledge feelings drive concerns. I spoke next. I own the motorcycle. I park it in my driveway or garage. I ride on weekend afternoons. Never early mornings. And I idle less than a minute. I brought decibel readings measured at the sidewalk. I slid a simple sheet forward. They're lower than the landscaping crews on Tuesdays. Dana's mouth twitched. Bill studied the paper like it might sprout extra facts if he looked long enough. Karen tapped her nail on the table. You made my son cry. I chose my words carefully. I'm sorry, he felt disappointed. But disappointment isn't theft. And it's not my job to solve expectations someone else set. We spent an hour turning the same few ideas into different shapes. The mediator was steady. Bill was careful. Dana was practical. Karen's frustration lay on the table between us, like a live wire. We ended with a list. The board would review noise standards fairly. I would keep the bike garaged overnight. The board would revise the courtesy notice process to require photos and rule citations. And the board would remind residents that private property is, private. On my way out, Dana caught my sleeve. "For what it's worth," she whispered, "I appreciate how you handle this." "Just showing up with paper," I said. "Paper helps," she replied. "Paper reminds us we all agreed to the same rules." The revised process worked like a seatbelt, not glamorous, but life-saving when things got bumpy. Petty notices slowed. When one arrived, it came with photos and citations, which made it easy to respond calmly with a photo and a citation of my own. A rhythm developed. Someone complained. The board compared the rulebook to reality. And most of the time, reality won. But Karen didn't stop. She adapted. She recruited. Suddenly, 2 new complaints arrived, signed by neighbors I barely knew, repeating phrases from her earlier letters, as if they'd been drafted by the same hand. A petition showed up in group chat about restoring neighborhood charm, and my name was in it, like a wine stain. I could have gone door to door on defense. Instead, I invited folks over for barbecue on a Sunday afternoon. Nothing complicated. Burgers, lemonade, a cooler big enough for a neighborhood's doubt. I left the Harley in the garage and played music, low old rock, the kind that makes even quiet dads hum. People came. The Whitakers, the Morales family with their twins who collect interesting rocks. Mr. Franklin, who wears suspenders like it's a uniform. They ate. They talked. They looked around and realized my yard wasn't a biker bar and my garage wasn't a showroom. It was a normal driveway with a hobby that gleamed. At one point, Mr. Franklin sidled up, voice soft. Back in the day, he said, I had a Camaro I loved. The color was too bright for the neighborhood ladies. They wrote a letter. I sold it. Still regret that. He patted my shoulder. Hold on to what's yours. Later, after the grill was cold and the sun had the patient orange, it saves for good endings. Dana stopped by. We're holding a policy session Tuesday, she said. Open to residents. We're drafting a complaint protocol with guardrails. You should come. I went. The boardroom had a whiteboard and a stack of printed agendas. Words like evidence, timelines, and appeals made neat columns. We debated calmly about thresholds for action, about warning versus fines, about the difference between preference and rule. Karen showed up halfway through, sat in the back, and didn't speak. Her silence said plenty. She wasn't used to a room that didn't orbit her. By the end of the night, the board had a draft. Complaints must include dates, times, and supporting photos. Anonymous complaints wouldn't trigger fines, and the board would track serial complainers to prevent targeted harassment. It wasn't perfect, but it was adult. 2 weeks of quiet passed. I started sleeping better. The Harley's cover went back on like a blanket that believed in me. Then, on a windy Thursday, I found a thick envelope in the mailbox from a law firm downtown. A cease and desist. It accused me of emotional misrepresentation toward a minor and suggested restitution in the form of surrendering the motorcycle to resolve ongoing distress. If audacity were currency, this letter could have bought a yacht. I read it twice, then called Mark. He chuckled. Sounds like someone hired a letterhead. He said, reply formally through counsel. Keep it boring and factual. Cite the board's own notes. Offer nothing. A friend from the veterans group, Lydia, who knows how to cross-examine time, drafted the reply. It was 2 pages of calm no. No admission. No apology for existing. No transfer. We attached the list of mediation outcomes and a short paragraph about potential counterclaims if the harassment continued. Silence followed. Not the kind before a storm. The kind after. In that quiet, something unexpected happened. Neighbors started sharing their own Karen stories in the open. The Morales twins' rock collection had been labeled yard clutter once. Mrs. Whitaker's wind chimes had allegedly implied a pagan theme. Mr. Franklin's garden gnome had survived 3 complaint letters and now wore a tiny felt helmet in defiance. The stories were funny in the way bruises are funny. Once they've healed, you can laugh because the ache's gone. A petition appeared at the next meeting, not the vague restore charm thing, but a formal call to remove Karen from the board for misuse of authority. It had signatures from more than half the homeowners. Bill's eyebrows climbed higher with each page he turned. Karen arrived late to that meeting. Cheeks flushed like she'd jogged through her own frustration. She started to speak. Bill held up a hand. We'll follow procedure, he said gently. There will be time for defense and a vote. In the discussion that followed, folks weren't cruel. They were specific. I received notices for approved paint. My dog's vest became a theological argument. I was told my son's basketball hoop made us look low market. The phrase hung in the air like a bad odor. Karen tried to recast herself as a champion of standards. The room had grown allergic to that perfume. When the vote came, it was secret ballots in a cookie tin. Tasha shook the tin like maracas, then counted with solemn care. The result wasn't close. Karen was removed. You'd think that would be the end. In real life, endings are more like landings. You aim for the runway. You bounce once, maybe twice, and then you roll until the brakes can do their job. The board sent out a letter the next day acknowledging the vote and outlining the new complaint protocol. It read like adults talking to adults. It also invited volunteers for a rules audit committee. I signed up. Because if you want better rules, you should sit at the table where rules are made, even if the chairs are uncomfortable. We spent 3 Tuesday nights with highlighters and coffee. We translated vague phrases like neighborhood character into measurable things like front yard setbacks and noise between certain hours. We added an appeals process that didn't require a PhD in patience. We drew a bright line between personal preference and community standard. We put in bold, the HOA has no authority to require the transfer of private property. Dana, who had looked tired for months, started to look like someone who'd found a bridge back to her own porch. Bill smiled more. Tasha perfected a template that made notices clear without sounding like threats. The neighborhood, this careful experiment of fences and friendships, steadied. And Karen, she avoided eye contact for a while. Then one morning, she waved. It wasn't a friendly wave or a fake one. It was a wave that said, I lost. But also, maybe, a wave that said, I'm still here. Communities don't work if losing equals exile. They work when losing equals learning. That Saturday, I rolled the Harley out under the oak. Sunlight puddled on the tank. The chrome held a sky so blue it felt like a dare. I thumbed the starter. The engine caught with a growl that sounded, to me, like relief. I sat there a second, gloved hands on the bars, helmet strap snug, letting the idle settle. Across the street, Mr. Franklin lifted his coffee in a toast. The Morales twins gave me double thumbs up and one very serious rock. Mrs. Whitaker's wind chime sang a small agreement. I wrote out slow, "The way you do when good things are fragile," and turned onto the main road. With that feeling you get when something heavy you've carried so long, you forgot its weight finally lifts. Here's what I learned and, I ain't preaching. Just sharing. A HOA can be a fence that keeps the goats out of the tomatoes. Or it can be a stick someone uses to poke the neighbors they don't like. Paper matters. Calm matters. Showing up matters. So does community. Which is really just a fancy word for people who decide to care at the same time. If someone tries to push you into giving away what's yours, a bike, a paint color that makes you happy, a small wind chime that sounds like your grandmother's porch breathe, read the rules. Gather receipts. Speak plain. Ask for citations. Put your dates in a line. Invite people over for burgers and lemonade so they can see your life with their own eyes, not through someone else's adjectives. And when the board is reasonable, support them. When they aren't, nudge them toward reason with paper and patience. If you're not sure which is which, good neighbors will tell you. Ask the teacher who's watched second graders negotiate crayons. Ask the retiree with the gnome in battle gear. Ask the twins with pockets full of rocks. There's wisdom on every sidewalk if you walk it. I still ride most weekends. I still wipe down the tank like it's a mirror I might need later. The oak still throws shade in the right place. Sometimes, as I zip my jacket, I see a curtain move in Karen's window. Sometimes she steps out and checks her mailbox. We nod. That's enough. So, what would you do if a kid pointed at your Harley and said, "Mom says you're giving me that one"? Do you lock the garage and hide? Do you shout until your voice gets hoarse? Or do you do the boring brave thing? Document. Show up. And steady the room until truth finds its chair. Tell me in the comments. Anyone else had a HOA? Try something like this. What did they do? And what did you do back? Because somewhere out there, another neighbor's hands are shaking over a coffee cup. And they need to hear from people who've steadied theirs.